For this video, I forgot to record an intro, but I will be installing the runners and throttle bodies for the ITB setup, along with the fuel rail system. I hit a couple problems along the way, but we're getting closer to that first start.
Starting with the middle ones, I'm going to try to get the runners on, and then I have to get the tube on. So I have the tube ready to go. I think what I'm going to have to do is probably set this in first, wiggle the runners on, and then pop this into place. What I did for the tube was seat it into the bottom of the runners, and then basically wiggled it on where the spring goes into the block at the bottom, wiggled it onto the long stud coming out of the head, just to make sure everything's kind of seated properly. It looks like it popped out a little bit, feels like it's in there. There's that O-ring on the tube. Just making sure it's seated in there properly, making sure that the O-ring is in place. Everything feels good. So with the tube in place, I can go ahead and start putting the washers and the bolts onto the studs. Got the odd size 12 mil nuts for these. It seems like most things on this car are either 10 or 13. My ratchets are hitting the edge, so we'll have to go through with a wrench and get everything tight. So originally I didn't think there was enough room to get anything onto the bolts. Once you screw them on far enough, you can kind of wiggle in some different sockets with extensions and whatnot to kind of dodge the apparatus here and have something short enough to get in there, but still get room. Took a little bit of finagling. I think swivel sockets would have worked out a lot better, but first set her on. Before I put on the last set of runners, I went ahead and put on the variable throttle position sensor. This is a different one from the E30 because the E31 is just an on or an off throttle position sensor, and you need this variable one to be able to, tell where you are in the throttle. Works better with the standalone, so you need to change it over. And because this is going to be up against the firewall, I figured I would put it on now just to save me some headache, and I honestly don't think it's even accessible. Once it's on, so you can see it'll fill into that space. That'll be right above these coolant lines. So I'll be able to plug it in, but you would never be able to put the sensor on with the throttle bodies in place. I have to adjust these. You can see that the center set is closed, but the front set is just a little bit open. So I got to figure out how to kind of work the adjustments to make sure that everything is closed at the same time. And eventually, once the car is running, I do have a tool that will be able to measure, I guess it measures like the vacuum of each of the runners eventually, to really get everything synced up perfectly. But for now, I feel like it should just be a little bit closer before even trying to start the engine. I'll get the last set on. It looks so much better now with just a couple on. So having the final piece on will be such a game changer. Well, another quick day working on everything. I have the runners on, and basically this is the most basic ITB setup. I just don't have anything else right now. You can see they're a little out of sync, especially this back set. They were a pain to fit through the coolant hoses and all of the kind of engine cables. So I got to figure out how to get these to sync up better. There's some set screws and these like L brackets that work off of the center one. So I just kind of have to get everything figured out. I think at this point I can start working on getting the injectors and the fuel rail transferred over. So where I have the towel stuffed in the top of all of the runners, I'll have to put in the fuel rail. The fuel injectors will go in there. Then, a couple wires to hook up. Should probably put back in my bleeder screw before I forget about it. get that stuff transferred over, and then I'll slowly, I guess, start working my way from passenger side over to the driver's side. getting everything else hooked up. I think I unhooked the starter to manipulate some of those wires in that area. And then I have to start thinking about some other vacuum hoses. I'll try to figure out how to stretch the TPS sensor. Right now it's, you know, in a casing. So I think I just need to kind of free those wires, and then I'll have room to stretch it to where it needs to plug in at. But just, yeah, slowly start making my way back across the car. I know I have a couple coolant hoses that I've unhooked to drain the coolant and just kind of be able to work in that area. So can't forget about those. Got to get that hooked back up so that I bought more coolant. So when we add in the fresh coolant, you know, we don't immediately dump it back out. Probably should have taken this off still in the car, but honestly, I couldn't even see these bolts. So hopefully it's still easy to pry. These should just pop out once everything's freed up. Got the wiring section apart. Got the fuel rail out with the injectors still attached. I'm not going to be changing the injectors just yet for this build. I think maybe with the more airflow of the ITBs, I might have to step up a little bit. I want to say the stock M20 injectors are like 14 or 16 pounds. So it's really not a lot of flow, but we're also not making a lot of horsepower, so it's okay. When I had my 2.9 liter, I think I stepped up even to the 21 pound pink top injectors that I think were on like the S52. I had more flow on that, but I really don't want to change this. I think I've seen other people go to like the 19 pound, what they call the Mustang. I guess it's out of like the Foxpot here, the SN95 Mustangs. I don't really remember which ones, but we can go to the 19 pound injectors if needed. But we're sticking with stock for now. We'll see how it is, but these definitely need to get cleaned up. They're pretty junky, and the fuel rail just looks dirty, but that'll clean up real easy. So I have everything cleaned up on the fuel rail. Gonna go ahead and try to get the injectors seated in here. And then once I have that seated in, then I'll go ahead, plug in the wires, get that set, and we'll be one step closer. These mounting brackets I have on the ITBs should line up with the mounting brackets on the fuel rail, so we shouldn't have any concern there. It's slowly starting to look like an engine again. Kind of ran into some spacing issues. I have this piece, which is where the throttle cable, I guess, ends at. Where it was set normally with no tension on the spring, basically is in the same spot that the fuel rail was in. So I took off this entire bracket at first, got the fuel rail in, and now basically this is resting on here. You can see that this joint is way off from where I had it previously when it was at full rest. So I gotta figure out either to shorten this a ton, which I honestly don't think there's that much space, or I'm doing something wrong in this area. So I'll reach out. I'll kind of leave that section how it is for now. I'm gonna reach out to Rama and see kind of how to go about this issue, or maybe there's some photos online that really show what I need to do. In the meantime, I can start getting probably the new throttle cable installed. I still have it tucked away in the corner. I haven't really looked at where it mounts, so that might give me a little bit of difficulty. So I'll go ahead and switch that out. In case anybody's ever wondering why you need to change out your throttle cable, try to line these up at the ends. And you can see the new one is slightly longer. That's probably only like a few inches, but you need to do it. But yeah, that's kind of me cleaning up the engine bay and getting the first part of the ITBs on. We'll have this wrapped up pretty soon, I think. Just a couple more nights of working on it and we should be done.